Welcome to the Creative Condition podcast with me, Ben Talon, illustrator and creativity coach, founder of the Creative Condition, artist and writer. I bring 20 years of creative industry experience and a lifelong love of creativity, a fundamental pillar of human happiness, to you through ongoing personal exploration and the shared experiences of others. You'll get a nourishing mix of creative industry professionals and people far and wide using creativity in ways that can take our learning to the next level so we can maximise our unique blend. The show has been supported from day one by Illustration X, a tremendous illustration agency representing a shining global roster of illustrators and animators over at illustrationx.com. The music for the show is by Dirty Freud, who you can listen to now on all good streaming services. And for everything else, for my coaching, resources and inspiration, head to thecreativecondition.com. I'm talking partnerships. What does it mean one-on-one with another for our creativity? It's crucial. Throughout my life, after reading a beautiful book excerpt, I realised the importance of both the fleeting, the fundamental, and the whimsical relationships in our lives, and how the dynamics with one other person can change everything. This is the Creative Condition. How are you doing, guys? Welcome to the show. My name is Ben Talon, as ever the host of the Creative Condition, now in its 10th year as a podcast. You can check out much more, including the resources, coaching opportunities if you want to work directly with me to help elevate your creativity and get you on the right path with conscious control over yours at thecreativecondition.com. Check it all out there now. There's a book list. A reading list. Book club reading list, I get mixed up. There's a reading list that I curated specifically to help you with your creativity. Very broad. Psychology, art, design, it's all going on up there. So check that out. Of course, there's over 300 episodes of this podcast. You can go and listen to those now on the website or head to whatever streaming service you prefer. How are you doing, guys? I hope you're well. I hope you've had a good week, wherever you are in the world. Good night, good day. I'm feeling a little rejuvenated today after a visit to a legendary graphic designer, Anthony Burrell's studio and home last Friday. I got to spend half a day with him. A wonderful guy. We met at Paradiso, the inaugural festival in Mexico, in Merida. We shared breakfast. Anthony and his lovely wife, Emma, who's a wonderful garden designer. She's going to be on Gardener's World soon. I think it's around the 28th of August, 25. Just to timestamp this, but it was a reinvigorating experience to walk into the epicenter of someone's creativity, a studio as awesome as Anthony's, to see where the magic happens and to hear their story, their career journey, which I'm going to share with you people in the podcast very, very soon. I left reminded of how much I need and love my art. That might not sound like a revelation to you guys who check in with me every week, but this year's been interesting because I've found myself at the intersection of my work as an illustrator and my work as a writer, my work as a creativity coach. I'm juggling the three. I'm loving all of them. But for a while, because I was going down new roads, including the coaching and the writing, I was after the shiny new thing. And I began to doubt how much I still loved my design and my art. I don't think I ever truly questioned it, but I became a little jaded. I wasn't making the right work. I wasn't engaging with the right points of curiosity to keep me into it in the same way that I was insatiably when I started my career. Now, this is kind of inevitable because the further we get down a track, the more we do a thing, the higher the likelihood that it just begins to lose a little colour around the edges, and we have to fertilise that and recolour that with new sources of inspiration. And it wasn't that I wasn't doing that, it's just that my head and my heart was very much in the coaching work, this exploration of creativity that's come to characterise my life. It really has. So I made the mistake of disconnecting my art from that a little bit and sort of second guessing it. It's there to pay the bills. I'm still good at it. I still do a good job for my clients, but I don't know if I love it like I did. Now, going to Paradiso in Mexico in March and walking into Anthony Burrell's studio down in Rye on the southeast coast of England changed everything. reminded me how much of a nerd I am for the craft, for telling a story, for good writing. It isn't that I'd lost any love for illustration, it's that I'd stopped pouring my voice, my lived experience and my feeling into it somewhat, and only focus on the commercial work while I was building something else. Now the ideas are re-emerging. I hit up on a new personal project idea yesterday, which I will share with you in the coming weeks and months. But it just spoke of so many experiences I've worked through with my coaching clients who've also found themselves at various crossroads and intersections where they've questioned things that are fundamentally important to them. Now, this is what we do. We turn on ourselves because creativity is an extension of self. But what we really need to do is just move the puzzle pieces around, work out what it is, make sure we're injecting new sources of inspiration, make sure we continue to learn, that we stay curious, that we read new books, we watch new films, we go new places, we interact with people who might not be the people we consider to be like-minded, but can challenge us in a new way, and that is what today's show is all about. It's about partnerships. Quickly, I want to thank the founding sponsor of the show, Illustration X. They've been here since day one. They helped me even think of the show as an idea. To quote Burrell, think of your own ideas. They thought of their own idea for me, Harry Lyon-Smith in particular. Said I'd be good for podcasting because I wanted to do more media work off the back of my debut book, Champagne and Wax Crayons, because I fell in love with being back in educational institutions, getting to go into universities again, talking to students, talking creativity, seeing other people's puzzles. It's funny how it all kind of weaves, all these little offshoots, and they all come back full circle to that core passion that you've probably always had, that was a part of your nature, and nurture has at times enabled it and other times dampened it. So, Illustration X, wonderful illustration and animation agency who've supported this show, helped me get it off the ground, continue to support it week in, week out, and also support our creative industry. So check them out, illustrationx.com. They're a fantastic group of people doing great work. So partnerships, let me read you an excerpt. I'm reading a book at the moment by Matt Dickinson, sports writer and journalist, called 1999, Manchester United, the treble and all that. Now bear with me, this is irrespective of whether you're interested in football at all, it doesn't matter. This is a beautiful story of human connection. I'm going to read you 3/4 of a page that I read on the toilet this morning as per my Reclaim the Throne campaign. Check that out at thecreativecondition.com. It's about why the reclamation of our minds starts with our arses. How we're always on our phones in the toilet, in the bus stop, in the supermarket queue, during any moment of downtime, when we could be nurturing our creativity and something so much more additive to our lives. And I read this chapter, so this chapter is called Coley, in reference to Andy Cole, striker for Manchester United who played in the 90s. It's about how he was left out in the cold and he'd been sort of excommunicated from the first team plans by manager at the time, Sir Alex Ferguson. And ultimately, quite by accident, he was thrown into a partnership with Dwight Yorke. They tried the partnership in the season for one game and it hadn't worked. Since then, Ferguson had written off in his mind the worth of Andy Cole and Dwight Yorke as a strike partnership for the team. Now here is a piece that blew me away this morning, and this is the premise for today's show. After an awkward, largely silent relationship with Eric Cantona and open animosity with Sheringham, which we will come to shortly, Cole had a mate alongside him, one who never stopped smiling. Yorke showed him a different way, easing the pressure. What I learned from Dwight is that his attitude is very carefree. You know he's always laughing, always joking. I call him Peter Pan because he's never going to grow up. I love him. His attitude and just the way he used to come in, breathe a little bit of fresh air into the dressing room was phenomenal. The next 5 games, they started together. United scored 21 goals, with Cole and Yorke sharing almost half of them. In the match after Southampton, they put 5 past Wimbledon, with Cole rounding off the scoring by nutmegging a defender. He was reborn. Cole and Yorke would plunder 53 goals between them across all competitions in 1998-99 and share 31 assists. to read back my report of flying back from the crushing victory over Brøndby in the Champions League group stage, where they helped United rack up 6 goals in 62 minutes, is to be struck afresh by the transformation in Cole's mood. I wrote of a rejuvenated spirit, a change in his body language. Cole and Yorke were inseparable, giggling their way from airport terminals to hotels to training grounds. Through a stroke of luck, it was coming together of a beautiful chemistry, according to Yorke. Cole talks with pure joy. Ferguson was not about to deny his good fortune, given everyone knew he had chased Kluivert. That's Patrick Kluivert, by the way. And had largely ignored Cole in the first 2 months of the season. Asked if he had foreseen the partnership blossoming into one of the most feared in Europe, he told The Guardian in February 1999, "No, absolutely not. It's a piece of luck. I admit, I had no idea." Now, what's special about that is the chance aspect. That these guys were happenstance. They came together through accidents and mistakes and all other kinds of things. Now, don't get me wrong, they were at the same football club. But what it got me thinking about this morning is what is the importance of partnerships in creativity? I'm not just talking about collaboration, I'm talking about partnerships. Now, that can be anything from a friend to a chance mentor in a single meeting to someone you've never even met, someone you belong to the same contemporary group with. But coming out of COVID, we all got a little bit isolated, didn't we? During it, for obvious reasons, because we were under lockdowns in various countries. But coming out of it on the other side, there was a fear. There was a cave mentality. How we all kind of had to re-emerge, and it took us all longer than we might have thought to do that. Some might have been chomping at the bit. I know I certainly was. And one of the reasons I was because I'd been thrown into new parenthood just 2 months. Twin parenthood just 2 months before lockdown. So my life was already upside down. I was already in a state of flux and absolute chaos. So while it was horrific, COVID for me was different. So when the time came, my life had changed anyway. So I didn't have the fear of a connection. So I was chomping at the bit to get back into venues and to do things and to see my tribe again. That also speaks to the fact I'm quite a social guy by nature. I'm relatively, I wouldn't even say I'm extrovert. I'm just socially confident. But what I realised is that there is this string of partners throughout my life, and there are many, 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 many of them. And I don't like putting anything in a hierarchy, so this list I'm about to give you and elaborate on, please don't take it as this person is more important than that. I've missed many, many off there. I've shared countless partnerships, all of them, and I mean this, have equal value. But I wanted to pick some that showed a range, that showed what partnerships can look in your life, because I want you guys to think about how partnerships have impacted your creativity over the years, the ones that have really enabled you. And it might be nothing to do with practicing art or design. I'm talking about enabling you as a human, helping you to shed light on your personality, to go on a self-discovery journey, or simply someone who might awaken you to a new form of culture and a new way of living. There's so many iterations of what a partnership might look like. But I made this list of mine. Something I did on the other side of Paradiso, the inaugural festival in Mexico that I went to in March, run by Hector Ayuso and Marco Fan. So Hector was the founder of Off Festival. He's one of the partners on my list I'm going to tell you more about today. They invited me out there to launch the biography I'd written about Hector. And that's what we did. I also did a panel with Tyler Schlossberg, Owen Harvey, and it was going to be Ivan Cash, but unfortunately Ivan fell sick and had to pull out, which was a real shame. But Ivan's awesome. Go and check out his work anyway. Brilliant filmmaker. But coming away from there, I didn't want to lose that feel that I felt like I'd been back to school. I'd been on a big school trip. I'd been to art school all over again. And I knew I would be returning to my family life, which I adore. But I spend a lot of my week alone in a garden studio, working as an illustrator and doing things remotely often. Didn't want to lose that communality, those fleeting moments, those beautiful conversations, those partnerships that I'd struck up at Paradiso. So I started to write a list of my contemporaries, of people who helped to give me knowledge, helped to inspire me, were contemporaries in my era, in my lifetime, much the way you look back and you see Warhol and Basquiat and all those beautiful connections that gave way to movements and new ways of thinking about creativity. I wanted to list mine to encourage you to think about yours because I think it's vitally important. Here are the ones why. I'm going to kick it off with my Uncle Ray. So my Uncle Ray is an incredibly shy person. Also incredibly curious, creative-minded. He's got a writer's brain. He's done a lot of great writing over the years, written comedy for the likes of Bob Monkhouse and the Two Ronnies and all kinds of things. Even though I never lent into that as a full career, he would just dip in and out and do it. He lived he has lived something of an idler's life. But when he's shown his creativity, it's been magnificent. And what would happen, there's that thing where, okay, so both my parents were mentors when it comes to my creativity. They enabled it, they encouraged it, they never pressured it. But you cannot overstate the role of a parent in as much as you're never going to see your parents as cool as an external adult role model. My Uncle Ray was that. He would come down a couple of times a week. We would draw together. It was just one of our pastimes. We would get a little notebook out, we would sketch something. We didn't even particularly know what we were drawing half the time. We wouldn't stay up front when we were drawing a certain thing. We would just sketch together. And what that did, it fired my competitive personality because I hated the fact that he could draw so much better than me. And he didn't lower his drawing to sort of meet me in the middle and make me feel better, and I'm really glad that he didn't, because competition is really healthy for all of us to learn about what we're good at, what we're not good at, to save us time fucking around doing something that we're not good at. And it made me want to get better, and it drove me, and it really did what some great art directors will do later in my career, but a really formative time, and I got really good at drawing. I had no idea that I was good at drawing for my age, but I knew I just wanted to be as good as he was. And it wasn't going to happen because we're talking 6-7 years old. And he was probably mid-30s at that point. So he was a fully grown man. He'd been doing creative stuff more or less all his life on and off. He had some real ability. But it gave me a kick up the arse, and it also gave me another adult to get critiqued by, who would give me feedback on the drawings and say, thought this was really cool. How about improving this bit by doing X, Y, and Z? It was a beautiful relationship. It was a partnership, and it accelerated my learning in the craft of drawing that I would come to lean on very heavily when I studied illustration at BA level. And then, of course, 18 years and counting as an illustrator. But Ray was more than that. Being a writer, he had that writer's brain. He would tell stories about characters. He would share lines of prose that he'd loved. He'd tell me about a poem or a song or a cultural movement that I'd never known about. So he was a gateway at a time when there was no internet, mid-1990s, when I had to get my cultural input from magazines, from TV, from the radio, and you don't know where to look when you're a kid. So you have to stumble somewhat. So having a person like that in your world is really, really important. So nice one, Ray. That is the first partner. Number 2, Shane. So a good mate of mine, Shane from back home. If you've read The Creative Condition, you'll have read about him, Shane Gall. He is a wonderful web developer. And Shane was a tough, tenacious little fucker. That's how we used to think of each other. We became the best of friends and remain that to this day. And we had a paper round at the same shop together. And Shane would pass me with his dog Rocky. And only down the line when we became good friends did we confide in each other that he used to think of me as that big ginger tosser. I used to look more ginger than I do now. I was very auburn in my younger years. And I used to think of him as that little prick who lets his dog shit. I once saw him not pick up a dog shit. And that there was a little animosity there for no real reason. And then when we had mutual friends, we spoke, and the rest is history. We were crying on each other's shoulders through relationships. We have shared a deep passion of learning about the human condition throughout the years, which if you were to meet Shane, especially back then, he was dripping in gold jewellery, tattoos at an early age, tracksuits, looked a bit like Brian Harvey off E17. But you know what? He's one of the most genuine, honest human beings I've ever met. He'll do anything for you. He continues to change my life all of the time through our deep love of learning and of the things we're passionate about. We have many shared interests, but more importantly, we give a shit about the people in our lives, and we help each other out of tough times. We are massively curious about what we're doing. When Shane, he used to be a postman, and then he'd been in a job that he wasn't loving when he had kids at quite a young age. And through that time, Shane was building these leagues for a FIFA online league that he was a part of. So he would code and build the league tables and kind of make these interfaces for people he played online gaming with. And this blew my mind. And I said, have you ever thought about doing this? And he said, what, professionally? And I said, yeah. Like, you have got such an ability here and you seem so drawn to this. You do this with all of your spare time when the babies are in bed. Why are you not looking into that? Because he didn't like his job. He had a delivery job at the time. He worked in factories before that. He worked as a postman. Nothing wrong with any of them jobs. But Shane had this spark, this energy that I felt could be housed elsewhere. Now, at this time, I was studying at university, so I'd had that sort of look at another way of being and another step of independence, and I was studying illustration, so it frustrated me that Shane was not liking this job and kind of doing it to make the money while his kids were young. And he followed that up and he started to study it on an open university course, and he taught himself and he dragged himself up, and now he's been running his business as a web developer and he is so passionate about it. But that partnership, we've always done that for one another. When I started to coach as a creative about a year and a half ago, Shane was enraptured by learning that this was even a job, and he said, that is you, mate, that is you. You care about people, you have always helped people, you know about creativity. Wow, like, I didn't know this was a job, but this is you. And he told me that on a day when I had imposter syndrome. So that is just as much as saying that that's another form of partnership. That's a life coach in a non-formal way. That is someone who has got your back through thick and thin, who is your biggest believer. Those people are vital, so look out for yours. Right, next one. Mr. Shackleton. So, many of us have those kind of accidental mentors, those teachers who step in at the right time and just do something when you're least expecting it. Now, Mr. Shackleton was the father of a lad in my year at school who was an immensely talented, charismatic, natural artist of a human being, one of the most pure artists I've ever encountered in my life. Saw it on the first day that I met him. There was just something in his soul that sparkled. It's the best I can give you. It was incredible. It was real. And I saw it. Now, his dad was a design technology teacher at school. We sort of did it as an arbitrary thing, much in the way that dance and drama are very sadly and naively put as kind of side courses in schools and little bit part things that no one really, other than the people who teach them. Go back and listen to the Abby Lucas episode, who appears later in this podcast, by the way. But yeah, Abby teaches drama and English at school, and we had a great talk about that. But he taught what was essentially a fringe subject at that time. Now, at a time when I was 15 years old and expected to find a work experience place, this was in year 10, in secondary school, high school, if you're listening from overseas, it was the second to last year, the penultimate year. We were given a 2-week placement. We had to find somewhere to go and find out what the world of work was like. Much like it is to this day, I couldn't stand the idea of doing something that didn't motivate me. So I felt lost. I rejected everything on the list, said nope. And now by this point, the teachers were getting frustrated because they wanted every kid signed up to something, and I didn't want to go and be in a shop, even though I had many great retail jobs after this. But at the time, nothing was motivating me at school other than a little bit of English and storytelling. Not art. Art was terribly taught, very dull, backwards ways of teaching. And, PE. I loved PE. That was my escape pod, really. But truly, I was very lethargic in school. I did the minimum, I did very little of my homework, and I scraped by with creativity and excuses around that. So when Mr. Shackleton became the first person in my life to say to me, what do you like to do? I said, interesting. I like to draw. That's more or less what I do at home when I'm not playing out. I said, okay, cool. Leave it with me. I'll call the local college art department. We'll go from there. Okay, what does that mean? A couple of days later, he comes to find me in my classroom. Now, I saw Mr. Shackleton maybe once a week in this lesson, occasionally bumped into him in the corridor, but whenever we were in that class, he'd kind of come by the way teachers hover when you're working on something practical, and would just ask a couple of questions, about what was going on. And I think he saw something that I was wearing that I wasn't letting out there. I wasn't giving it away with authenticity. I was scared, I was a bit lost at school. So he comes back, he calls me out of a class one day and says, I've got you a placement at Keighley College Art Department. You're going to go down there for 2 weeks. They've got a desk. You, 3 other kids from school who are in similar shoes to you, are going to go down there. You're going to get a taster of the various courses, and that's it. So I got to go and spend 2 weeks in an old industrial unit in Keighley where the walls were partitioned and they were painted white, and it was fucking beautiful. So it changed my life, that place. Felt like Eden to me. And I've got Mr. Shackleton to thank for that by asking a very simple, fundamental question that to this day, tragically, so few people ask. So I consider that a partnership because, again, this was weekly, it was sporadic, it was occasional, it was generations between us. But I was having a conversation just this week with someone I'm writing a biography with, and he was talking about that, about these people, and he considers it greatness. And we're not talking about just masters in fields, we're talking about greatness, because that's a subjective term. But in a life, those people who step forward and give you a piece of culture or a nudge or a suggestion or something that kickstarts something in your life that you can now not bear the thought of having not had. It's powerful, it's magic, it's wizardry, in my opinion. And Mr. Shackleton was that. Okay, next, Tom. So Tom Gatenby was a friend of mine at said art college when I eventually signed up to a BTEC National Diploma in Graphic Design. Tom was, for better want of a term, a mosher at the time. Massive baggy jeans, constant different kind of hoodie with a rock band on it, stretched ears, dyed hair. And he was a big fucker as well, he was tall. Now Tom was a bit of a role model, and I went back to tell him this after I released Champagne and Wax Crayons because I wrote about Tom in that book. The feeling at college, and I know you're all going to be familiar with this, is that everyone felt like everyone else knew what they were doing. The truth is no one did. We all went there made out of jelly, and we all left feeling like we were going to be artists. And you walk in those doors and people are wearing their own clothes for the first time. Some people are having fags outside. Some people are having a cup of coffee. It feels like you've grown up all of a sudden and you're expected to step up to something. And we all did it in varying degrees. But Tom, to me, had it going on. And what's funny is I turned up as an absolute ragtag shambles. I hadn't found any identity, especially in terms of how I was dressing at that point. And I turned up in tracky bottoms, a shit fake leather jacket, big sleeper earring, and Lego hair. And I would hang around with Tom and also Sam Ive. Sam is now running an awesome company called, what are they called? It's going to come to me. Raven Forge. They make weaponry. I'm talking like fantasy stuff, Lord of the Rings swords. They work for Assassin's Creed doing the replica weaponry. And Sam started this. Just go and have a look. They're awesome. Look them up. Based in Yorkshire. Incredible stuff. But Sam was an emo and Tom was a mosher. But Tom in particular, I would follow him to when he got his ear stretched, which was every week. I would get fish and chips for my lunch. I would sit at the back of the ear stretching place, wait for him to get his ear stretched, and then we'd have a wander around town. And I just loved asking him questions about these big nights out he was having in Leeds and going to music festivals and all this stuff that I wasn't doing any of at the time. And I loved just sitting under that learning tree. And it was learning in as much as learning that things could be different, because neither of us knew what was going on. Sam didn't know what was going on. We were all just expressing something for the first time. I hadn't expressed my anything yet with my leather jacket, my fake leather jacket and my trackies. But slowly but surely I started to get a few naughty shirts and I started to want my own version of what they were showing. And that was beautiful. So that's another kind of partnership. Next one up, Steve Wilkin. So Steve ran the illustration course at UCLan for a great many years. I think it was about 24 in the end when he retired. Now, any great tutor or mentor has a way of bringing things into your life like an artifact or a piece of culture that opens a door and sets you on another path. And Steve would kind of quietly just hover around the studio and, nose at people's work. And you would have crits with him and the likes, but there were other tutors on the course who were maybe there, more of the time because Steve was running the overall course. So he would move from room to room. But Steve and I connected very early on from having our roots in Yorkshire, both being Leeds fans. There were all these commonalities. And of course, at the core of that, our love of drawing and creativity and the craft. Now, Steve would just hover around the studio, and he would drop things on the coffee table like a guardian from the weekend, and he would spread out the supplements to sort of show you a certain piece of work and just wink or nod and walk off. And he'd look at you, he'd look at me specifically, and he'd open a coffee table book like the Association of Illustrators Images Annual and just leave it there. And there'd be Olivier Kugler, or there'd be Stefan Sagmeister, or there'd be Lucinda Rogers, thinking of people at the time who were prominent. And it would just do something. There was magic. He'd put magic in it, and it was there for the right people to find. So you'd sit there and flick through it when you were supposed to be doing something else. And I'll be honest, it was a way to kind of procrastinate and pass some time at uni, but invariably you'd come across something that was awesome. And you'd either make a photocopy, and we didn't even have proper camera phones at the time, so I wouldn't even take a picture on my phone. I'd have to scan it, or, remember the book and go and buy it. And it was incredible. And Steve just had a way of doing that. And we would go to the pub at lunchtime, me, a few other keen students and the tutors, and we'd have a beer and we'd get quite pissed on 2 pints. And they'd tell stories about these artists making weird, quirky little artist books, or, escapades in London during New Blood Week and stuff like that. And Steve knew how to whet appetites about illustration and about visual communication. And it saddens me that tutors are so beleaguered with bureaucracy now and getting bodies onto courses to meet the fees and all that stuff. I think it's heartbreaking because it loses a bit of that. But Steve was awesome. Steve was a partner throughout my entire degree. He's remained that ever since. I consider him a good friend. We only check in seldom these days, but I think of him a lot. Right, next. Danny Allison. Well, I could talk all day about Danny Allison. He was the first guest on this podcast. It remains one of my strongest episodes. Go back and listen to episode 1 if you want a taste of our relationship and Danny's brilliant story. Well, Danny Allison was in the second year of my UCLan degree when I was in the first year studying illustration. No, he was in the third when I was on the second, because what they did was they condensed second and third year into one big studio room. Now, Danny would always come over and ask how my hangover was. We'd always seem to have hangovers at the same time, and we shared this strange middle headspace that we would enter when we had hangovers that was just silly, and the sense of humour that we shared immediately clicked. Now, we didn't actively keep in touch. He had mates on his course. He'd come and sit with me for a little bit, and then he'd go back to what he was doing. I had mates on my course, so we'd sort of stay to our own halves of the room. Occasionally saw each other at the pub, but we later clicked when we bumped into each other in the street after we both graduated. Now, by this time, Danny had been working for a year as an illustrator, getting commissions, and he invited me up to his little studio that's just above a shop on Fishergate in Preston. Now, I remember walking in there, seeing an active commission that he had up on the screen. Can you imagine? When you've graduated and you've not even had a sniff and you want it so badly, but you're still working a full-time job. I was working in Waterstone's booksellers at the time. Seeing the object of your affection being created by a real human in real time. I got a taste of that with Tom Gold when he came to visit on the third year at UCLan and showed us some cartoon books, and I got to ask questions and hang out, and that was amazing too. But to actually become friends with and go and sit in a studio with someone who's doing what you desperately want to do, it had the same effect that my Uncle Ray had on me. But this time, we were contemporaries. It was happening. We were professional people facing forward with portfolios and big dreams of what this might be. He wasn't full-time. He was working part-time at Jessop's photography shop at the time. I was working full-time, like I said, at Waterstones. And something special happened, so 6 months later, me and my studio mates moved from the freezing cold garage that we rented out by Moore Park in Preston. We moved into another freezing one in Oyster Mill, and Danny joined us on this one, and that changed everything because we were one partition wall, back like it was art college, away from each other. And I was able to ask questions when I felt doubt. I was able to ask advice about getting commissions, what I should be charging, what he was doing, who he was working for, how it had come about. It was absolutely incredible. It was like an internship for a freelance illustrator. But most importantly of all, Danny Allison saw people. He saw people for who they are. I've never met a more authentic human. He will give you it, both barrels, full authenticity, full honesty. That repels people. I've seen people repelled on many occasions from Danny. But those who connect with him, love him, go to him for advice. They see knowledge in there and a passion for visual communication and craft and creativity. And that is what I had access to. So what Shane Gall had started in my adolescent years with a group of friends that we shared who were very open, honest people, and they pulled me away from the chameleonic behaviour patterns that we fall into in school. We fall into that maturity trap and just try to fit in, and none of us we don't know who we are, but it also stops us from finding out who we are. Danny Allison blew all of that away in a profound way. We were out burning characters we'd made in the studio. We made this Coconut Joe character like off Mighty Boosh with a supermarket coconut with a cape on a shower curtain rail. And when we came to leave the studio, we had a ceremonial burning out in the car park. It was completely bananas. It was like we were at art college more so than it was at university. Danny and I have shared that ever since. We get on the phone to each other. We talk honestly and openly. I'm going to get him back on the show soon because it's been, 200 and some episodes, and he's got a lot more stories. We've had a lot of changes in our career paths. Going to get him back soon. But someone who has that experience, who can sit you under their learning tree, but also help you to see not just yourself, things the way they are with a degree of pragmatism and reality, is so important when you've got an artistic brain, when you are prone to sensitivity and undercutting yourself. Danny was ruthless in business. He would teach me how to ask for better fees. He would teach me how to get the right conditions for working. He was just very, very giving human and remains a dear, dear close friend to this day. Next, Dirty Freud, Danny Skerritt. So anyone who's read Champagne and Wax Crayons now will recognise these two names because they contributed with their own bits in that book. And Danny, I moved from sharing a studio with Danny Allison in Preston to Manchester and ended up by complete chance living with Danny Skerritt, who would later be gone to become Dirty Freud, but only after we'd founded Quenched Music. Now, Dirty Freud represents a significant chapter in my life, and I say chapter, there's an exercise I set my coaching clients called the chapters, and it's about not trying to be all things to all people and fit into all groups and maintain every relationship in your life with the same effort. The idea is that any great book ebbs and flows. Characters come and go at the right time. They have impact, whether that's a fleeting appearance, think of Tom Bombadil in Lord of the Rings, or Frodo, who's the protagonist. Now, we all feel a little sad. Let's say there's a university mate you'd like to see more, but you don't. I find there's something really beautiful about the idea that they had a chapter in my life. They played a part. They gave me something that can never be taken away, that is now a part of who I am, and I will always have that forever, that bond. But there's also really great excitement that they may re-emerge in my life down the line. Maybe we'll be in the same city at the same time and we'll meet for a pint. Maybe they'll come to visit. Maybe they won't. There's beauty in that, and there's a really great sense of letting go in that regard and focusing on the right relationships now. But Dirty Freud represents 5 years of living together in Manchester, a significant, major chapter in my life. Now he continues to be a constant presence. We don't see each other as much as we'd like, maybe 2-3 times a year, because we both have families, him north, me south. We're very, very busy running our businesses too. But when we meet, nothing has changed. It's a continuation of that story. But that chapter in Manchester, those 5 years, was an incubation hub for stepping away from the thing we were doing at the time in the best way to learn how to nourish it. So I was an illustrator. He was working in theatre and playwright at the time because that was his background. Creative writing was his studies. So it's creative writing. What we did for each other, the chemistry of our partnership, unlocked our curiosity about broader arts. It was what inspired Danny to get back into writing music and to learning how to make electronic music. He's since played Glastonbury and is now full-time. Part of his own band, Dirty Freud. It's incredible to see. He's written operas. He's done all sorts. That was a part of the incubation hub of us living together like two dickheads for 5 years. Breakups, makeups, ventures, shared studios. We ran a Quenched Music company in Manchester where we just used that as our vehicle to get into the music industry and work with people that we loved. Those 5 years were crucial. We were like soulmates. We went to bed at the same time. We were like an old married couple. It was absolutely magic. Just like Danny Allison remains an absolute pillar in my life, we continue to coach one another very informally by challenging each other, getting excited about the next new thing. Who is that person in your life? Who is that natural coach who, when you spend time with, things happen? You want to do the next exciting thing. Next, Dave Hilton. So around that time, living with Dirty Freud, the inspiration he gave me, seeing his successes, made me want to keep having my own. And I was an absolute rat on LinkedIn. I pestered everyone to try and get work. One of those people was Dave Hilton, who was a creative director of WWE at the time, and I'm a huge wrestling fan. Every regular listener of this show will know that. Dave Hilton couldn't be more of a mentor. Got back in touch, said give me a call next week. Love what you're doing. It might take time. It's a big dusty corporation, that being the WWE. So it takes time to get new ideas over the line. But I love what you're doing. Love your passion for the wrestling. We'll do something. We did. Dave pushed me on every one of those projects. He was the consummate art director. He challenged me when things were off. He knew when I'd overworked things, and he would tell me in no uncertain terms. He would get the best work out of me. But he knew when to let me go. He knew I was a lover of the wrestling industry. He knew I watched it every week, didn't need to be educated, left me to my own creative devices when it came to ideas and understanding of the wrestlers and the storylines. But we have maintained that ever since. We see each other if we end up in the UK or the States at the same time, which isn't as often as I'd liked, but we catch up on the phone. And all I have to do is send Dave an image to this day, and I know that I'll get a straight shooting from him. He'll come back, he'll critique it in the best possible way, and I love it, because I know when I've done good work and I know when it's failed. Those people who hold you to account, who challenge you, are absolutely crucial too, and that was one hell of a partnership. Hector Ayuso, so you'll know about Hector if you know about Off Festival. He was the founder of the world's biggest design festival in Barcelona. Stepped away when it no longer felt like a challenge. Now runs Paradiso with Marco Fan. Incredible project. But Hector has had a hell of a life story. I know that because I wrote his biography this year. He's a wild spirit. Trouble in childhood, a lot of adversity, but he lives for creativity. This man supports the creative industry like no one I've ever seen. And since we were connected by Simon Dixon from Dixon Baxi, Hector has given me opportunity after opportunity and given me full trust every single time. He's a very quiet man of few words, but when we meet, the bond is creativity. We're working together on another biography for a different designer right now. I've never known anyone place that kind of trust in someone with so little evidence. I sent Hector a short fiction story for Off Festival 2023 when he was putting together a book for the festival called Life on a Lamppost. There is a reading of it somewhere in the podcast archive if you search for it. And Hector loved the story, he loved the beat, he loved the energy, he loved how raw and wild it was. So when the time came and a lot of people had been telling him he needed to tell his story and he felt like it might be time, he asked if I could write his biography in that style, and it blew my mind. We worked on the book together, we launched it at Paradiso, and I adored every second. It's the most fulfilling project I've ever worked on, hands down. You don't find too many people who put that kind of trust in you, but I believe that Hector is a wizard, and he has done that for so many people and continues to do it. So have a look what Paradiso are up to, and their agency Not On Sale. Doing some amazing work. Marco's one of the best coaches in the business. He's been such a mentor already for me. We've got our own little partnership going on. It's beautiful. Abby Lucas. So you might remember Abby if you're a regular listener to the show. Abby is the drama and English teacher that I had on the show to talk about the importance of drama and education. I think Abby would be mildly freaked out if she knew I'd referred to her as a partner. But what I mean by that is a partner can be a very fleeting presence in your life. And now this goes back to the list of contemporaries who make up my era, the people who are doing things they're passionate about, who are great at what they do, who are around me and inspire me and uphold me in this ecosystem. So Abby lives very close to me. We met at the pub. And when I found out she was a drama teacher, I invited her on the podcast. I also interviewed her for the Creative Condition book to talk about what a missed opportunity drama is in education and why it's so important to the human spirit, especially for kids who've not had the best guidance in their early life and have got themselves in trouble or in some way alienated in education. So I list Abby on that basis. She's one of my contemporaries. She is doing something, contributing to a cause which is helping young people who need it the most through creativity in the same neighbourhood as me at the same time. We might see each other once every month when we bump into each other on the dog walk or end up at our networking event that I run with Lewis Plummer in Salisbury. But that's it. But I do consider her a partner, and that is my message with this one. A partner can be someone completely distant. It could be someone you've never met. It could be someone that you've developed a bond with through their writing or their work on the internet that do something for you, that stimulate your curiosity, that get you thinking differently, that remind you that there is great value to creating even in this fucked up world. Next up, Tyler Schlossberg. So you'll remember Tyler from a few episodes ago on the podcast, one of the best interviews I've ever done because she was just amazing. She just thinks differently. And I approach Tyler's creativity with a childlike naivety because I just want to learn. She's got one of those brains. The way she animates, the way she runs her workshops, the way she writes is all a part of the same pure artist. Now, we all need to live as our inner artist. And when we don't, great frustration happens. It's why I get coaching clients. But Tyler is exactly that. She is open to being a vehicle for the ideas to come to her, to be in her best creative version. And it's just amazing. We talked on the same panel for about 45 minutes at Paradiso this year in Mexico. I read her newsletter. I look forward to it coming every single time. And she also reminds me of a good friend of mine who had another partner, Kyla Paolucci. You might remember Kyla. She's been on the show twice so far. I think episode 4. Yeah, Misled was episode 4. Early on. She's in the first 10 episodes. She was a designer at WWE. That's where I met her. She went on to design at HBO. She now works teaching in New York. She's awesome. And she has the same sensibility to her work, such personality, purity. It's Kyla's work, it could never be anyone else's. So Kyla and Tyler both show me a way in terms of just living as an artist. It's just incredibly motivating. Last one on the list for today, Joanna Henley. So Jo is a fellow creative coach and mentor. She's also an artist and illustrator. We share a lot, but we don't do it very often. So Jo and I check in maybe once every few months. We have a Zoom call and we share ideas. We could talk for an entire day. Sometimes that ends up being a couple of hours. We're both very sensitive. We're both susceptible to burning out or overdoing it because we're too enthused about what we do. We love creativity that much. But I love those kind of occasional relationships where years can go by. But when you check in, it's so real that it almost shrinks that time down to nothing. It just erases it all. You've all got those friends where you'd like to see them more, but when you meet them, nothing's changed and the kind of frequency is not the issue, it's the purity and the depth of the relationship. Now that's what happens with Jo. So Jo was a brilliant episode on episode 4 of the show. She was also on again recently, and there was an episode in between. So if you search Misled or Joanna Henley for the most recent one, you'll find those in the show archive. But Jo continues to inspire. She's doing mentoring in a very different way to me. She was very giving and selfless when I was starting my practice by giving me loads of advice. And she's just one of those partners along the way where you just change dynamic. And I think just to sign off on this is what I mean by partners. It's people that bring something out of you that you just could not do on your own. Now, I know what it feels like there on some days in this world. It can make you feel futile about, the efforts moving forward. But a good friend of mine who's very wise, Stephen Baycroft, awesome writer, he told me he'd seen a quote that when the shit hits the fan, when everything starts to collapse, it won't be the businesses or the governments who pulls out the shit, they'll be the artists. I believe that. I think we've got a great role to play in this world. I want you to feel enthused by that. But I believe you can only truly feel as ignited as you need to be with great partnerships. So who's in your world? Who has been in there? Who are your partners throughout your life? Because they'll be there, whether they're accidental, incidental or entwined. So let me know. ben@bentalon.com, or you can message me on LinkedIn. Love to hear from you. If you want to work with me on the coaching front, I love developing longer term programs, 6 months or a year, but we always kick off with a pit stop. That's my one-to-one intensive audit of your foundational creativity. I see things you will never see because you would see things in my life that I would never see. That's just the way it goes. It's why therapists have therapists. Who can see the wood for the trees? That's what a coach does. I see all your good stuff. I see your hold-ups, your blind spots. I help you to get it in order. We do it in one big intensive session. So get in touch, have a look, thecreativecondition.com/coach. Drop me a note through the form. If I think we're a good fit, we'll jump on a Zoom call. We'll make sure. If that's the case, we'll book it in. It's affordable, but it will elevate you to where you need to be. Awesome, guys. Thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this episode on partnerships for creativity. Guest episodes coming up soon with Filmograph. Awesome agency doing film title sequences out of Los Angeles. Incredible stuff. Go and have a look at Filmograph. Alison Heilichser, expat American therapist working as a relationship counsellor and psychologist. I've forgotten the title. I'm sorry, Alison. In Singapore, she's got a brilliant book called Rethink the Couch. We're talking about all that kind of stuff. Human fundamental needs, where they're going wrong. It's part of the mental health series. You can also go back and check out anxiety and burnout episodes. The show is sponsored as ever by illustrationx.com. Have a look at the mini campaign on thecreativecondition.com. Reclaim the throne. Don't just get your phone out when you're in the bus, at the bus shelter, on the toilet, on the train, in the supermarket queue. Think, use your brain, observe, look around, daydream, read, do something that is additive to your creativity. Awesome, guys. Have a lovely week. I'll chat to you very soon.